Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. We have a super fun video today. It's a book recommendation video, and since it's the month of January, and January is a new year, and in other words, maybe a new start, we're going to be recommending books that all have to do with characters having new starts, which I think is super fun, so I'm excited to get into it. I have 11 books on this list. And unlike my mental health video, which I did earlier this month, I have read all of these books except for one, although it's on my TBR and I'll probably read it next month. But even though I've read most of these books, I still put their average Goodreads stars on here, as I did on my last book recommendation video, just because I think it's kind of a fun idea to give you guys their average star ratings. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with our first pick. And these aren't in any sort of order except for the order that I literally thought of them and wrote them down. So our first pick is An Hour Unspent by Roseanna and White. I picked this one because our main male character, Barkley, has been a thief in his past life, and now he's become a Christian and he's kind of making a new start. And he's still kind of a thief because he works for the War Office in World War I, so he basically steals for the War Office. So like if like one general says, hey, I need you to sneak into like this embassy's office and get me these papers, he goes and does that. So it's still kind of stealing in a way, but it's like stealing for the government, and there's these like moral questions in there. He's like, oh, well, now that I'm like born again and a new Christian, is it still okay for me to do this if I'm doing it for, you know, the government, for our country, for the war, like. And so it's got those kind of interesting questions. As he kind of starts a new Christian life, he has to ask himself these lifestyle questions, and I thought that was a really interesting play to have in the book. I will say, though, this is the third book in a series. It's the third book in the Shadows Over England series, and each book is about one of the siblings in this thieving family. So the first two books are about each one of Barkley's sisters. So I would say that you really need to read this series in order. I mean, you could read it alone if you wanted to, but I would suggest reading it in order. So this is the third book, so that's kind of like a caveat for this one on this list, because it'd be really good for you to read the other two books first. The second book on my list is before I forget, An Hour Unspent has average of 4.46 stars on Goodreads. Yeah. The second book in our list is The Lacemaker by Frantz. It has an average rating of 4.20 stars on Goodreads. This is a super fun one because it takes place in the American Revolution, and the main girl, her name is Libby, and her father he's like, I forget if he's like the mayor of the town, or like he has something to do with like the British, like he's a British officer, and he's like high up in the town of I believe it's Williamsburg. So he's like, anyway, he's a loyalist and he's a part of the British government. But Libby's mom is very much patriotic, and she is very much pro-revolution. And she is actually kind of missing a lot of the book because Libby's dad basically like sent her off to England to hide because he didn't want it getting out that she was pro-revolution. So Libby kind of has to make her own choice about what she thinks, and so she ends up breaking from her father, breaking from her family basically, and you know, being this high society girl, she kind of goes off on her own and tries to start working, and she even like changes her name a little bit. And so it really is a fresh start because she's like, I want nothing to do with my past life, my past family. I'm changing my name. I'm becoming a working girl. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm changing my political beliefs. And so, yeah, she has a big change in her life. So that's definitely a fresh start. And that is a standalone book. There's no other books in the series. Although she did kind of, Laura Frantz and Jocelyn Green, who wrote A Refuge Assured, they kind of put little Easter eggs in their books to relate them to each other. But they're both like totally standalone books, and they don't really have anything to do with each other except for that Easter egg. But it's an interesting like fun fact. They have Easter eggs in them that relate to each other. The next book on our list is A Tailor-Made Bride by Witemeyer. This one has an average reviews of 4.05 stars on Goodreads. This is also a standalone book, and this one's fun because it is a fresh start, but it's kind of like dream fulfillment fresh start because the main girl in this book, Hannah, she's a seamstress, and she's always dreamed of having her own dress shop. And she, at the beginning of this novel, finally gets the money to do so. And so she moves to a new town and starts a new life as a dress shop owner instead of just being a seamstress in the big city. So it's very much a fresh start because she's got her own place. She's in a new town. She has to meet all these new people. So that's a fresh start. But it's also kind of dream fulfillment because she's always wanted her own dress shop. So it's kind of an interesting pick for this list. The next one is the Leah's Garden series by Lauraine Snelling and Kiersti Giron. I put the whole series for this one on this list because, like many of Lauraine Snelling's books, her series kind of all run together and follow the same people. You know, like Roseanna and White, her series follows a sibling from each group, or like Like Roseanna and White's book, her Shadows Over England series, each book in the series follows a sibling from the family, but the stories also kind of stand alone by themselves. You know, each sibling has their own very unique storyline. Whereas a lot of times in Lauraine Snelling's, each individual book may follow a different character, but the stories all tie together, especially with this Leah's Garden series. Each book in the series kind of follows a different sister, but we still have storylines from the other sisters as well. So they're much more tied together than some other series that are still tied together, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. But anyway, the first book in this series is called The Seeds of Change, and it has an average of 4.33 stars on Goodreads. And this one's interesting because these four sisters are forced to leave their home and head out west on the Oregon Trail to start a new life. So this book series really follows them starting their new life and their new farm out on the Oregon Trail as four sisters. So it's definitely a fresh start. And like I said, though each book, and the fourth book is coming out either at the end of this month or next month. I think it's this month that the fourth book comes out, and I will be reading it. Even though each book kind of focuses on a sister, all three of the other sisters are still very much involved in that book. So all four sisters have storylines, even if one storyline is more prominent in each book. Okay, I felt like I kind of gave a really confused explanation on that one, but we're going with it. So the next book on our list is Fairest of Heart, again by Witemeyer. This is the first book in her Texas Ever After series, but I think that though these books are technically a series, I think that they're very much standalone as well, because this series is basically fairy tale retellings, and so I'm not sure that beyond being fairy tale relatings, the stories are actually going to go together that much, but I don't know. The second book comes out this year, so I guess we'll see if it goes more with the first book than I think it will. This is just conjecture on my part, but I think they're going to be like standalone stories. They just go together because they're fairy tale retellings. Anyway, this is a Snow White retelling, as you can probably guess by the color scheme. And I would call it a fresh start because the girl, her name is Penelope Snow because she's Snow White. She is basically left for dead somewhere and adopted by these by a group of old men who are they're old ranchers rather than being dwarves. They're drovers because they're ranchers. Get it? Drovers, dwarves. Anyway, so she kind of has a fresh start because she had been an assistant to an actress before, but then she's left for dead and she's rescued by these old ranchers and they're giving her a fresh start on their farm. So that's a bit of a fresh start. It has an average of 4.32 stars on Goodreads. The next book in our list is A Place Called Home by Wick. It has an average of 4.09 stars on Goodreads. This is the first book in A Place Called Home series, and I would definitely recommend the whole series. It follows what's their last name? It follows a family. The main guy in this book is a part of that family, and their last name escapes me because it's been a while since I read this book. I actually read this book for the first time, I think, in like junior high, and I've definitely reread it since then, but it's been a couple years since I've read it. But in this one, a girl named Christine, her grandfather dies, and she's given this warning from his old lawyer or his old doctor, somebody who like worked with him, that basically her life is in danger and she needs to get out of Dodge fast. And so she pretty much leaves in the middle of the night and hops on a train, and she has no idea where she's going. And she ends up in this really small town of Baxter. And once she gets off the train, she is immediately attacked and left for dead. And a local doctor finds her and basically heals her and brings her into his family. So yeah, it's a fresh start. I mean, it's kind of a forced fresh start because her life is literally in danger. But she just, in the middle of the night, takes off and hops on a train with no idea of where she's going. Or she does have an idea of where she's going, but that doesn't work out. Anyway, fresh start. That's a place called Home by Laurie Wick. The next one on this list is also a Laurie Wick book, and it's Whatever Tomorrow Brings. It has an average 4.14 stars on Goodreads. It is the first book in the Californian series. And I have them up here, but they're in omnibus form. Like I have the first two books are together and the second two books, so I didn't want to hold it up because it doesn't really show the cover of the first book. Anyway, so the main girl, whose name escapes me because it's been a while since I read this, Katie. Her name is Katie Donovan, Caitlin Donovan. Yeah, it came to me. So Caitlin and her family, her parents are missionaries in Hawaii, and that's where she's from. That's where her siblings are from. She's never been to the United States, and this is like the 1870s, so she doesn't know really what the mainland is like. I say she's never been to the United States. She's from Hawaii. Although I don't know if Hawaii was a state when this book takes place. I don't know when Hawaii became a state. And I don't know if it was a state when this book came in place. So I don't know. I assume that it is. They don't say she lives in a different country. They just say she lives in Hawaii. So I'm going to assume that it is a state at this time. Yeah. I have a degree in history, but that is one historical fact I do not know. But yeah. So the family ends up coming to California, and they basically tell the kids that they're coming to California for the summer. But in reality, they're coming to California because the mom is sick, and she finds out she's dying, and she dies pretty quickly. And then the father goes to Hawaii to collect their stuff, but he leaves the kids there. Caitlin is 20 or 21 at this point, so she is an adult and she can watch her siblings. But all this stuff happens, and the father ends up not being able to come back for a really, really long time. So basically, Caitlin is in California with her siblings. She grew up on this small island of this small Hawaiian island with a really small community, and now she's in San Francisco in the 1870s, and it's just crazy. She doesn't know what's going on, and they're staying with her aunt, but then something happens with the aunt, and so they have to leave. And so she basically packs up her two younger siblings and gets a job out in middle of the nowhere, California, and takes them there and starts a completely new life. So it's a ride, but it's a really good book. And again, the whole series is really, really good. Yeah. The next book on our list is The Sweet Life by Suzanne Woods Fisher. This one has an average rating of 4.16 stars on Goodreads. It follows Dawn and her mother. Yeah. I had to think if Dawn was the mother or the daughter, but she's the daughter. Dawn and her mother, Marnie. So basically, Dawn's fiance decides at the last minute that he doesn't want to get married, and just doesn't necessarily leave her at the altar, but leaves her at the halfway through the engagement. So she was supposed to go to Cape Cod on her honeymoon with him, but since he's dipped, she's like, well, why doesn't my mom come instead? So she and her mom go on what was supposed to be her honeymoon, and they end up buying an ice cream shop and starting their lives over, basically. And that's a really simplified version. It's a lot more complicated. It's a very it's not a super, it's an emotional book, but it's not like an emotional roller coaster. It's kind of an emotional boat ride, if that makes sense. Yeah, because I don't know, like roller coasters are kind of like this, but boat rides are kind of like this, you know, they kind of meander. And I feel like while it's emotional and it deals with emotional topics like being left at the altar, and Marnie, the mom, is just coming out of cancer treatment, so that's going on. So there's a lot of emotional topics going on, but it's still kind of like a smoother ride. Like you're not being jerked around by all these emotions. So yeah. Yeah. I feel like my descriptions are very odd today. But okay. So the next two books kind of go together, and we have Laurel's Dream and Heart of the Mountains by Pepper Basham. Laurel's Dream has 4.60 stars on Goodreads, and Heart of the Mountains has 4.56 stars on Goodreads. Laurel's Dream is actually the only book on this list that I have not read yet, but it is on my TBR, and I'll probably get to it next month. Maybe by the end of this month, although I doubt by the end of this month because I'm in the middle of 2 books right now that I have to finish, so don't think I'll be starting that by the end of this month. But if you've watched my 24 in 2024 video, then you know that both of these books are on that list, and that I read Heart of the Mountains before Laurel's Dream because I thought they were standalones, when actually the guy in this book and the girl in this book are siblings, and this book happens first, so they kind of are more of a series. But I thought they were standalones, so I read Heart of the Mountains first. But they're both fresh start books, because in this book, an English guy goes to the Appalachian Mountains to become a doctor and missionary. And in this book, his sister comes to him because she's running away from an arranged marriage that she doesn't want. So she's like, I'm going to live with my brother in the Appalachians. So both of them are starting new lives in the Appalachian Mountains, which is very, very, very different from their upbringing in genteel England. So they're kind of along the same lines, but unique stories. Okay, my last one on this list is probably one you all know if you've been around Christian fiction for a long time. It's like the quintessential fresh start story, and that is Wind Calls the Heart by Janette Oke. And no, I'm not talking about the TV show. It's very different than the book. I am talking about the original book. It's been around forever. It's a beautiful story, and it is, well, first let me tell you, it has an average of 4.20 stars on Goodreads, and it is about a teacher named Elizabeth who grew up in the city in Canada, but gets a teaching position way in the Northwest, and takes off and has to learn all about rural living in, I think it's in like 1910 or so, maybe earlier, maybe like right at the turn of the century, but it's right around that early 1900s. Could be like 1890s, but it's right at the turn of the century. And so she originally thinks she's going to her brother's house, which is like on the edge of the frontier. So she goes to her brother's house, and then she meets the like school foreman, and he basically, if I remember correctly, because it's been a couple years since I read this too, he basically like hits on her and she rejects him. So in retaliation, he sends her to like the far reaches of the frontier, and it is so very different of everything she expects. But she learns a lot, and she has a really interesting story arc. And again, it is the first book in a series, a quite long series that follows her and her future husband and their kids. Like the last couple books, I think, are more about their kids than they are about her and her husband. But so it's one of those series. But yes. So that is all of the books on my Fresh Start list. I actually had a lot of fun doing this video. I hope you guys can tell. These books are a lot of fun, and I love them, and I love talking about them. I love talking about books, as you can tell. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments some of your favorite Fresh Start books, if you've read any of these, and if you love them, or if you hate them, let me know. If you have favorite Fresh Start books that aren't on this list, let me know. Thank you. I'll see you in my next video.